February 19th, 1945, the United States Marine Corps launched its most ambitious offensive against the Japanese at Iwo Jima. This little black sand spit of an island was the closest that we had come yet to the Japanese mainland. It was thought that the establishment of American air bases on this island would allow us to bomb the Japanese mainland more easily. It allowed us to land B-29s, and it also gave Mustang squadrons a place to launch from to be able to cover those B-29 strikes on Japan.
The assault on Iwo Jima was preceded by an incredible naval and air bombardment. There was both naval planes and marine aircraft, but especially the large battleships, and they had done painstaking efforts to map out Iwo Jima. In fact, they'd even pinpointed every possible Japanese position. But in the end, it still wasn't enough. It wasn't a sufficient bombardment to take out the Japanese, to really silence them. They just went deeper into their cave system. And when the Marine assault came ashore at the beaches, you had the 5th, 3rd, and the 4th divisions. When they came ashore, got past the sand of Iwo Jima, which basically is like instant coffee. Things bogged down on the beaches. They started going inland, and that's when the Japanese opened up.
The Japanese had very good fixed machine guns in the Type 3 and 6.5 and the Type 92 and 7.7. Now these are Hotchkiss-based guns, and they take Hotchkiss feed strips, and literally they're stamped steel, and the cartridges go in them, and they seem a little steampunk to us now, but the Hotchkiss feed strips worked actually pretty well. Now, of course, they had to oil the cartridges before they go through, and you had to make sure the feed strip was oriented properly. But they were quite effective machine guns, especially if they were emplaced. They could be fully set up, locked down. Extremely accurate guns. Some of them were even fitted with optical sights, with telescopic sights. And the Marines and soldiers, because of their slow rate of fire, came to call them the woodpecker.
During the course of the Battle of Iwo Jima, between February 19th and about March 16th, 1945, the United States lost just about 7,000 killed in action, and our war dead had to be buried somewhere. This simple plaque marks the spot where all 3 of the Marine divisions that fought this battle created a cemetery. Now, this plaque just marks where these cemeteries used to be, because no Americans are buried on Iwo Jima today. In 1949, the United States government disinterred the remains of all of our war dead on Iwo Jima and took them to places like the Punch Bowl National Cemetery in Honolulu. In the 1950s, then families had the option of having their loved one brought home, and many of them ultimately were. And so on an island where there is no lack of sacred ground, this may be the most sacred part of Iwo Jima. And that's because the Americans who sacrificed their lives to capture this island in 1945, this was the first place of burial that they had.
Want to know what's happening at American Rifleman? Follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. We'll be right back.
On the 4th day of the battle, Marines from E Company of the 2nd Battalion, 28th Marine Regiment, 5th Marine Division, made their way up from the beaches below here to the summit of Mount Suribachi. They were accompanied by 3 photographers: Staff Sergeant Lou Lowry of Leatherneck, Staff Sergeant Bill Janoust, who was shooting color motion picture film footage, and of course the AP photographer Joe Rosenthal. From the top of Mount Suribachi, the photographers captured a first flag raising. But that flag, once it went up, it was realized it was a little bit too small. It couldn't be seen easily from the beaches below. So they sent for a second, larger flag. And when that second flag was raised, Bill Janoust filmed it in color. Bill Janoust, who would later die on this island, his remains are here somewhere to this day. He's never been found. And of course, Joe Rosenthal snapped a still image of that second flag raising. That image went on to become the icon of the 7th War Bond Drive. Not only did that image go on to become one of the most famous photos of the Second World War, it went on to become one of the most famous photographs of the entire 20th century. Corporal Tony Stein was a former Marine paratrooper who was serving with A Company, the 28th Marine Regiment, 5th Marine Division, in February 1945 when the 5th Marine Division landed on Iwo Jima. Stein landed that day, the first day of the battle, armed with an unusual weapon. He was armed with a Stinger. The Stinger that he carried that day was an AN-M2 30 caliber machine gun, an aircraft machine gun. Had a 1,300 round per minute cyclic rate of fire, and it had been modified for use on the ground, modified with the addition of a bipod, the wooden buttstock from an M1 carbine, modified with the addition of front and rear sights. And so whereas most Marine units were carrying only the M1919A4 30 caliber air-cooled machine gun, Tony Stein carried his modified AN-M2 Stinger, and he could move and fight by himself. And in fact, when A Company of the 28th Marines lands on Iwo Jima on February 19, 1945, Stein is seen throughout the day moving from position to position. He would pour a burst of fire through the loophole of a Japanese fighting position while other Marines maneuvered to knock that position out. He did it so many times during the first day of the battle that he stood out among all of the other Marines that were fighting. But Stein's bravery ultimately caught up with him. On March 1st, 1945, near Hill 362B on Iwo Jima, Stein was doing exactly what he had done on the first day of the battle, when his luck ran out, and he was killed by Japanese gunfire. So his award of the Medal of Honor was posthumous, and he's remembered today as being one of 27 Medals of Honor awarded to Marines and sailors during the Battle of Iwo Jima. And he earned his Medal of Honor through the excellent use, the incredibly skilled use of the AN-M2 30 caliber Stinger machine gun.
Manila John Basilone is truly one of the legends of the Marine Corps. He had enlisted in the Army back in the 1930s, served in the Philippines, where he got his name Manila John. When he was with the 1st Marine Division on Guadalcanal, he was awarded a Medal of Honor. He commanded a section of heavy Model 1917 A1 water-cooled Brownings, and they were being overrun by one of these Japanese night attacks. And as the crews were being killed, he's up there working the guns, fixing guns. Guns are being knocked over, and using everything that he could to keep these guns going, and kept the Japanese attack back. He came back to the United States for a bond drive, and they were not going to allow him to go back because he was a hero. He himself insisted on getting back, and by the time of Iwo Jima, he lands commanding a group of Marine light machine guns. And on Iwo Jima, just as it had been on Guadalcanal, he showed incredible leadership, incredible valor, and ended up losing his life there.
The Japanese garrison on the island, like previous battles at places like Guam, Saipan, and Tinian, was wiped out. Very little of it was left. Some stragglers remained hidden in caves for weeks, and in fact, for even a few years after the battle. In the end, it turned out that the American bombers flying from Guam, Saipan, and Tinian and the Marianas, they didn't so desperately need fighter escort as the American bombers flying against Germany in the European theater. And so in the end, there was a recognition that the very high sacrifice that we made to capture Iwo Jima might not have been necessary, but Iwo Jima provided an important emergency auxiliary airfield for aircrewmen to land at. And Iwo Jima remained conquered territory of the United States until 1968. And in that year, the United States gave Iwo Jima back. And the Japanese government, through a treaty obligation to this very day, allows American civilians to visit Iwo Jima only 1 day per year. And that makes it one of the island battles that is least frequently visited. The place where 6,821 Americans sacrificed their lives. Iwo Jima was one of the bloodiest battles of the Pacific War. And for that reason, it's one of the ones that we remember most.